The plane cut through a bruised winter sky like a blade through old wounds, and somewhere between the hum of the engines and the dimmed cabin lights, a man who owned half the city felt smaller than he ever had. Christmas Eve had a way of doing that to people who had everything except the one thing they couldn't buy. As the aircraft lifted higher, carrying strangers toward their separate destinies, fate quietly arranged a meeting that would fracture a hardened heart and stitch it back together with something far more fragile than power. Before the story pulls you deeper into that night, take a moment. If you believe kindness can still change lives, if you believe in second chances and unexpected grace, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this live because of people like you. He sat by the window, a tailored suit pressed to perfection, a gold watch catching the cabin light, and a glass of red wine cradled in a steady hand that had signed layoffs without trembling. The CEO had mastered control, boardrooms, markets, people, but not the hollow echo that followed him everywhere. His calendar was full, his penthouse empty, and Christmas had become just another date to survive. Outside the window, clouds rolled like endless white fields, reminding him of a childhood long buried beneath mergers and acquisitions, beneath a father's voice that taught him winning mattered more than warmth. He had learned that lesson too well. The plane was quiet in the way only holiday flights were, heavy with exhaustion and unspoken longing. Rows behind him, a woman guided a small boy down the aisle, her coat worn thin at the elbows, her eyes alert with the vigilance of someone used to protecting fragile things. The child clutched a stuffed penguin, its fabric faded from love rather than neglect, and his red jacket seemed too bright for the muted cabin, like a spark refusing to be dimmed. He moved with the fearless curiosity of someone who hadn't yet learned to be careful with hope. As they passed, the boy's gaze lingered on the men by the window, drawn perhaps by the contrast between the polished exterior and the sadness that leaked through despite every effort to contain it. The CEO noticed the look and turned away, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. He had built his life on being untouchable, and yet here, at 30,000 feet, a child's attention felt like a quiet accusation. The flight attendants finished their routines, the light softened further, and the cabin settled into that suspended time where people slept or pretended to. The CEO stared at his reflection in the darkened window, seeing not the magazine covers or the accolades, but a man who had chosen solitude again and again, calling it strength. He remembered the divorce papers signed with the same pen he used for contracts, remembered missing birthdays, remembered telling himself it was all worth it. Christmas Eve had a cruel way of asking whether it really was. Somewhere in the aisle, the boy shifted closer, guided by a simple certainty that adults often lose. He placed a small hand against the man's arm, the warmth cutting through wool and years of emotional insulation. The touch was gentle, not demanding, as if the child understood instinctively that this was someone easily broken despite appearances. The CEO stiffened, surprised not by the contact but by the sudden tightening in his chest, an ache he hadn't felt in decades. The boy's eyes were wide and serious, the way only children's eyes can be when they're carrying truths they don't yet know how to soften. In his small world, problems had simple explanations and simple remedies. He had listened to his mother on nights when the power went out and stories were told by candlelight, when loneliness was named and kindness prescribed like medicine. He had absorbed that wisdom without question, carrying it now like a gift meant to be given. The mother noticed and hurried forward, apologetic, embarrassed by the breach of invisible social rules. She tried to pull her son back, but the moment had already unfolded, quiet and irreversible. The CEO met her eyes and saw not judgment, but fatigue and fierce love, the kind that rearranges a life around another's needs. It unsettled him more than any confrontation ever had. She mouthed an apology, and he shook his head slightly, a wordless permission to let the moment stand. The rest of the flight passed in a strange hush for him. He couldn't return to his wine, couldn't retreat into emails or market reports. His thoughts spiraled backward, to a boy he once was, sitting alone in an empty house while his parents chased success and survival in equal measure. He remembered wishing someone would notice, would reach out, would tell him he mattered beyond his potential. That wish had hardened into ambition, and ambition had calcified into isolation. When turbulence shook the cabin, the boy laughed, delighting in the sensation, and the sound cracked something open in the CEO's chest. Laughter, he realized, was the currency of connection, and he had been bankrupt for years. He watched the mother soothe her son, whispering reassurances, and wondered when he had last been soothed, last reassured, last allowed himself to be vulnerable without fear of losing control. As the plane began its descent, city lights glittering below like scattered promises, a decision formed, not the calculated kind he was known for, but a reckless, human one. He reached into his pocket and felt the weight of his phone, full of contacts he rarely called for reasons unrelated to business. He thought of his sister, estranged over an inheritance dispute that now felt absurd. He thought of his daughter, spending Christmas with a mother who had learned to stop waiting. He thought of the empty penthouse, the silent halls echoing with achievements that couldn't hug back. The boy, now half asleep, leaned against his mother, penguin tucked under his chin. The CEO felt an unexpected urge to protect this small, fierce belief that the world could be kinder than it often was. He realized the child hadn't meant to change him, he had simply offered a truth, and it was up to the adult to decide whether to accept it. When the plane landed, applause rippled through the cabin, a ritual of relief and shared survival. People gathered their things, eager to step back into their lives. The CEO stood, towering and impeccably dressed, yet internally unsteady. He waited as the mother and child moved ahead, then gently reached into his jacket and pressed a card into her hand. Not a business card with titles and power, but a personal one, a simple name and number. His eyes conveyed what words might have ruined, a hope to help, not as a savior, but as a fellow human trying to do better. She hesitated, then nodded, understanding that pride sometimes had to step aside for possibility. The boy looked back once, offering a sleepy smile that felt like absolution. In that moment, the CEO felt something he hadn't felt in years, the quiet certainty that change, real change, often began with the smallest gestures. That Christmas Eve did not end with miracles or sweeping transformations. It ended with phone calls not made in years, with apologies spoken awkwardly but sincerely, with a man sitting alone in a vast apartment choosing to feel rather than numb himself. He sent a message to his daughter, not polished or persuasive, just honest. He called his sister and listened more than he spoke. He donated not for publicity, but quietly, deliberately, to programs that kept families together during hard winters. Weeks later, he would meet the mother and child again, not as a benefactor but as a friend. He would learn that loneliness did not discriminate by income or status, and that connection was built through consistency, not grand gestures. He would sit on the floor and play with a stuffed penguin, awkward and smiling, discovering that joy did not diminish power, it redefined it. Near the end of this story, if it has reached into your own quiet places, if it has reminded you of someone you've been meaning to call or forgive, please take a moment to like, share, and engage with this video. Your interaction helps stories like this travel further than we ever could alone. And just before we close, here is a special request. Comment below with one small act of kindness you believe could change someone's life, even in a world that often feels too busy to care. Because somewhere tonight, on a plane or a bus or a silent street, a lonely person is waiting, not for a miracle, but for a friend.